And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Weekday Warriors of Wrestling for December. December,
Oh my God,
January.
Eric.
I know. I don't want to take us back to 2020. It's January 17th, 2021. I'm Eric Clancy. I'm joined by Patrick Kelly. And yeah, so how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Just enjoying life right now. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm getting ready for the Royal Rumble, which you and I have gotten ready by. We've got a new video up counting down the best Royal Rumble main events that never happened. So make sure to check that out. We'll probably have a link at the end of this video. But yeah, so today's going to be one of our classic rewind episodes where we talk about previous shows and give our thoughts on that. But why don't we do some current events first, Patrick? Wednesday Night Wars, as always, happens on Wednesday. We had Dynamite and we had NXT. It was actually the lowest rated NXT that wasn't a special that they've ever done. That wasn't like, like an award show or a clip show or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the evidence continues to mount that like NXT has just lost it. To be perfectly honest, it's lost everything that made it special originally. And I think putting it on USA, making it 2 hours, and this is all stuff that we've said before, but all of this, it sucked the life out of that brand, and putting up it against AEW has just made it even worse.
Yeah. I mean, obviously both shows were down because of the impeachment trial was on Wednesday. So, both shows are going to be down, but yeah, wasn't great numbers for NXT. But going over to Dynamite, I liked the show. Wasn't an amazing show, but I thought it was a very good show. What did you think overall?
I thought it was solid. There were certain things that they did that advanced storylines that I liked. Certain things like, just as an example, Sting actually coming out and doing something, because I know that.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, he had that amazing debut, which we all loved. But then every time he showed up, he just kind of did the same exact thing week after week. It's like, all right, is Sting actually going to do anything? And here he helped Darby Allin retain the TNT Championship. It's like, okay, Sting is pretty much on Darby Allin's side, which we pretty much knew when he came out with Darby Allin, that one segment where they walked out at the same door. But it was nice to see Sting actually do something. That was a nice step forward for whatever they're building to with the Darby Allin and Sting relationship.
Yeah, like every week Sting would come out, like Team Taz would come out, and then the lights would go out and they'd be like, who is this? Like, who do you think it's going to be? It's the guy who attacks them every week. So yeah, this was good that he did something. They kind of said like a little bit more about what he's doing with Darby Allin. So yeah, I thought that was good. I really enjoyed that match. That Darby Allin cage match was awesome. It was exactly what it needed to be.
I love the finish of that match too. That was a really creative finish.
Yeah, and it shows like, and AEW does this well. Everything doesn't have to be a finisher, like you can win things with you can win with moves that play into the story that you're telling. And it didn't really hurt Cage, but it helped Darby a lot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What else is on that show?
Well, there was the whole situation with the 6-man tag where they said the Elite are going to be in action. So we're thinking, okay, it's going to be Omega and the Bucks. And after the ending of last week's show, I'm thinking, holy crap, that's going to be amazing to see what those three do. But it actually wasn't those three. They took the Bucks out and put in the Good Brothers. And already we're seeing some cracks in the armor with like where the loyalty lies with the Bucks, and are they with Omega or are they not? And does Don Callis like having the Bucks around or does he not? It seems like he doesn't.
Yeah.
By the way, Don Callis has been terrific during all of this.
Yeah, he's been really good in this role. One of the moments I like. Okay, there were two things about this that I liked. So, I'm sorry. There were two things about this. One thing I liked, one thing I didn't like. One of the things that they did was they announced the Good Brothers, and then you see the Young Bucks waiting in the gorilla position, and they're like, okay, great. And they're like clearly pissed off about this because they had been told right beforehand that they were going to be wrestling. And Tony Khan's there too, and he's like shaking his head. So I liked the Bucks' reaction. I thought that made a lot of sense. I did not like that Tony Khan was there. I kind of hate how much Tony Khan has been putting himself more and more on the show. I mean, it's not a major part, but like, there are times where like, oh, we saw him backstage. Oh, he did that John Moxley thing. But like I feel like it happens to literally everyone who owns a wrestling company. They're like, I'm not going to be involved. I'm not going to be involved. And of course they're always involved because they can never get over the fact that like, oh, performing in front of a crowd is really fun. So I'm always
the Dixie
nervous.
Carter syndrome.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, it's the Vince Russo thing. Vince was a non-character. I didn't really mind that, but like when he became, like it just, it's not. I always worry about that. So I'm hoping that that's the extent of it, but time will tell. Let's see what else. We had the Brit Baker's segment with Cody, and we brought in Jade Cargill again, who is now, instead of feuding with Brandy and Cody, she's feuding with Cody and Red Velvet, which is like, I mean, probably a work rate upgrade, but a name and cohesion in the storyline downgrade. Especially, it is a downgrade because especially Brandy cut that great promo on Jade the first night Jade came out, which Jade cut that awful promo. But Brandy had a great promo that day, and it was like, and normally I mean I think we all agree that Brandy's not a great promo, but that one was. So like, obviously she's pregnant. It is what it is. There's more important things than being in a wrestling storyline, but it definitely has cut this it's cut the legs out from under this feud, I would say.
For sure, yeah. And whenever something like that happens, you just got to go with the best plan B that you can come up with. It's like, oh, Red Velvet, she was partnered with Brandy, so I guess that's the logical choice for a substitute. But yeah, the waiting room segment with Britt Baker, they've been doing a few of those on AEW Dark. I think is maybe a trial run to see if it can work. I like the idea of her having her own show. Maybe it needs to be tweaked a little bit. I didn't notice if they did it this week, but in some of the previous ones that they've done on Dark, they would pipe in like crowd noises and things like that, and that kind of cut into it a little bit. So, yeah, maybe it needs a little bit of tweaking, but overall, I think the idea of giving Britt her own like kind of talk show segment is a good idea.
Yeah, it'll help her improve, and yeah, I did think Rebel laughing awkwardly was very funny.
Yeah. Yeah, she's got like a very bizarre cartoonish laugh, which is pretty.
And her weird face. What else did we have? Anything else in these shows to talk about?
As far as AEW, I don't think so. NXT. I'm sorry. I mean, I hate to be a Debbie Downer when it comes to NXT, but it's like that show is just so remarkably uninteresting at this point. It's like there's literally not that much to talk about. Karrion Kross is back. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, and he's got a great look, and he's a star. It's funny because NXT. Oh God, I loved NXT from like 2013 to 2016 when it was in its 1 hour format, and it was what it was, and it built to those takeovers, and it was so good for that purpose. Yep. Then it got changed, then it got weaponized, and it's funny because, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with this style of wrestling, but people that criticize AEW, the thing they criticize AEW about is generally what NXT is. NXT is a lot of like really, I don't want to say vanilla midgets because, that's a derogatory term for some of these workers, but it's like these, like all their characters are, I'm a wrestler and hello. And then they just wrestle, and that's like pretty much it. It's not. It's funny because AEW is much more sports entertainment than NXT is. It's like good sports entertainment, which is always great. But like, I just find it funny when people be like, "Oh, AEW does this indie style wrestling." I'm like, I feel like NXT does that more than AEW does.
You would be correct on that. Like NXT, and we saw it the last takeover, the War Games one, where I talked about like everything that went wrong with those War Games matches. And it all came down to they're doing way too many moves. And that's just how it is.
Yeah. And it's like, I think it's like this Cold War of like, these guys are like, well, I can do these things. So like, why not? And just because you can do these things doesn't mean you like should do these things. I remember when I was like 13 years old, I was like a member of like an E-Fed, where you would do like role playing promos and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, like the person would decide to win it, but they'd like write the matches and stuff. And the matches would all be like every like indie match ever. It would be like everything would be over the top, and it would be like near fall, like crazy stuff. And it's like, man, when every match on the show is like that, it's like nothing matters and nothing means anything. And it's like, just because you can do 10,000 kickouts, like there's diminishing returns at a certain point. And I think it was during those like Gargano Cole matches where I was just like, I just don't know if this is for me anymore, because like Meltzer's like, this is like the best match WWE's ever done. I'm like, really? And like it's like this match has like no story, like through no fault of its own. Ciampa got injured. Like, I understand they were building towards something for a while, but they did fuck up the storytelling building up to that, so that is true. And then they just put these two people together, and then they're like, have a match, and they did. And it was like, I was in the audience at that show, like and I was like, like, I think this was a really good match, but I'm like, was it the best match they've ever done? Absolutely not. I was at Bayley and Sasha at Brooklyn, and that was a much better match because the story was better. And like Bayley like pulling up her fucking her headband and going to fucking work was like better than anything they did in that match, so it's like, I don't know, that's like, that got to that point where I'm like, I don't know if this is for me anymore. And it's like, I much prefer, like, I personally am like a more of an old school, like Crockett WWE guy, where like in AEW, where they're like, oh, like the first match on Dynamite, oh, Sammy misses the 450 or shooting star press, and then Cody pins him. Like, oh, the high risk had a consequence, like that's what I'm much more interested in. And so like, I mean, AEW just scratches that itch for me.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. I'm more of an old school minded guy. For me, and you mentioned Bayley's headband and what.
Hello.
Make a match stand out. To use another NXT example, the Kevin Owens Sami Zayn match, where instead of doing the typical finisher kick out back and forth thing, they had Sami basically get beaten to oblivion, and then they did that one spot where Kevin Owens like lightly pinned him, and then Sami Zayn just barely rolled his shoulder over, just very weakly. And it was like, so Owens is going to have to kill this guy to actually get the win. Basically telling that whole story and everything. And stuff like that works for me and helps matches to stay memorable and help them to stand out more as the years go on. And, big high spots and big finisher kickouts, that stuff kind of fades away after a while, after the initial moment. At least it seems that way.
Well, I mean, it really does. I mean, when you think about like the great matches from like history, like, and this is so WWE of me to say, because it's like what they say, but they don't do it right. But like, moments matter more. I feel like an asshole for saying that, because they're always like, oh, moment, but like moments isn't like, oh, Kofi Kingston doing the boom drop in Madison Square Garden. It's not that. It's like, it's Austin attacking like Bret in like the ambulance, but like, think back of like what's like some of the matches people remember most from the 80s. They remember that Magnum TA Tully Blanchard I Quit match, where like, instead of beating the living shit out of him, Magnum just lets him wallow in his own like patheticness and walks away. And like, I mean, is that as cool as like a moonsault off the cage? Like, maybe not, but like, it's like, it tells a better story, like it's just I don't know. Sometimes, like, and it's funny I use moonsault off the cage because Cody did that, and I think Cody probably has the best understanding of this stuff than anyone. But like, the point remains. Like sometimes not sometimes, in most cases, "I'm sorry, I love you" means more than like a near fall ever could.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like the best spot I've seen and the Cody moonsault thing, that thing was the finish, which I think in a lot of other matches you see today, it wouldn't be. It would just be another kick out. But I think my favorite spot that I've seen in the last decade was in that Omega Okada match where Okada's going for the Rainmaker clothesline. And they've been wrestling for so long that Omega just collapsed. And then Okada just went flying across the ring, missing the clothesline. I'm like, that spot said more to me about what that match was all about than any big high spot or big kick out that they did.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, so we've done this for years, and we're going to continue doing it. Patrick and I will do a Royal Rumble rewind, and we will talk about, on this episode and probably next week, previous Royal Rumbles, how we felt about them, how we feel about them now. We're just going to go back in time and chat about them. Patrick, on our random flick your cursor across the screen method of choosing a Royal Rumble, what are we talking about today?
All right, let's do this. I feel like we need Vanna White here to help us out. Well, this is impossible because the one I landed on is one that didn't happen. Royal Rumble 2004. There wasn't a Royal Rumble that year.
I don't remember it. I would remember it if something like that had happened.
Yeah, I don't know. It was that weird year where there was just no Royal Rumble, and we're not supposed to remember any of that. But
I remember really liking that one. If I recall, actually, I don't know the opener. I know it had the last man standing match for the world title. It had Brock Lesnar versus frickin' Hardcore Holly.
Yes, it did.
It had the Rumble, of course. One
of the best Rumbles ever, to be perfectly honest.
And what am I missing here?
The undercard is actually pretty weak. You mentioned Lesnar and Hardcore Holly. There was Eddie versus Chavo in a singles match. Rey Mysterio versus Jamie Noble for the Cruiserweight title in a match that lasted 3 minutes. So, yeah, that felt like just filler. And Evolution, Batista and Ric Flair defeating
against the Dudleys
in a tables match for the tag titles.
Yeah, I remember that because that was right after the pay-per-view that Evolution won all the titles.
Yes.
They won the tag titles. Orton won the Intercontinental title from RVD, and Triple H beat Shawn Michaels for the world title.
I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Goldberg and Kane in a triple threat. Yes,
you're right, because Triple H beat Shawn Michaels in 2002.
Yes, that was the 3 stages of hell match. That weird one was like, it's a steel cage and a ladder match. And it's like, that's awkward, but okay.
Yeah, it was like, let's take our cues from a video game.
Yep.
I like this Royal Rumble. So I don't care about those other matches, so let's not talk about them. But so Brock Lesnar and Hardcore Holly was hilarious because, first of all, Hardcore Holly got a world title shot, and if you ever see like an out of place mid carder getting a title shot, it's going to happen at the Royal Rumble because for the most part, unless they're like really down and they really need like a shot in the arm for business, they're not going, like the Royal Rumble is going to be the draw on this show. So they can like play around with other guys for this. So that match, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that's like a 6 or 7 minute match, right?
It was pretty short, 6.5 minutes.
Yeah. That was about, in real life, Hardcore Holly, who was an asshole, decided to be an asshole to Brock Lesnar and sandbag him on a powerbomb. So Brock Lesnar said, whoops, I'm going to drop you on your fucking head. And then he did, and he broke Hardcore Holly's neck. And then Hardcore Holly came back and he's like, and his finisher was like, I'm going to break your freaking neck. And it was a full Nelson. And he got this shot against Lesnar. And Lesnar like pretty much beat the dog shit out of him. And it was great because it's fucking Hardcore Holly. And he was an asshole and he got his neck broken. And I'm supposed to feel bad for him. So this was fun because Hardcore Holly got the shit kicked out of him.
Yeah, and credit to them, there was a storyline there that they did, and they built it to a completion, which was this match. So it was like there was something there. It wasn't just something that they just randomly did. Looking back on it, it looks hilarious because it's like, how the fuck did Hardcore Holly get a title shot? But
I mean, even as it was happening, I think we were like, how is Hardcore Holly getting a title shot?
Yeah, right. And it was it's really weird on paper, but yeah, Lesnar pretty much just beat him, which is what you would expect out of this match. So to that end, it worked.
Yeah. I remember the world title match being good, but having like a super predictable ending.
Yeah, it ended on the draw, which was I mean, you can say it was predictable, but considering what the main event of WrestleMania 20 was, I think it actually kind of played into that, where it's like Shawn still had a legitimate claim to the world title. And then when Benoit switched brands to, that guy that we're not supposed to remember, he switched brands after winning the Rumble to go face Triple H. It was like, I'm still hanging here, and I still am worthy of a title shot. So they actually legitimized a triple threat match where everybody involved had some kind of a legitimate claim to a championship. So I think the match itself, it probably hurt this match, but I think it helped make the WrestleMania 20 match even better.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You can do a draw on this show because, you have the Rumble. Yeah, no, I and that's like one of the greatest triple threat matches ever, probably the best. Which
it's
sucks
probably
for
number one, to be honest.
Yeah, and the Backlash one, the one after it, is pretty great too. Of course, the problem for everyone involved, and they can't brag about it, is because the guy who won it is a psychopathic murderer who killed his family. So, that happened. But this was a great actual Royal Rumble, if I remember correctly, Patrick, because they had a lot of different storylines going on during it. They had Goldberg and Lesnar was happening. So like Brock distracted Goldberg and got him eliminated. Yep. They had this long running, since I think the previous June, feud between Randy Orton and Mick Foley.
Yep.
And they have this great moment where I think it's Orton, and I can't remember who else is in the ring with him. Somebody else is in the ring with him, and it's like just Orton, and he's been in there for like 25 minutes. He's like exhausted. And then Foley's music hits, and Foley had been out for like a while. So like the crowd goes nuts, and he just starts beating the shit out of Orton and chasing him around. It's like one of those great moments. It reminds me of the Savage Jake moment from the 92 Royal Rumble.
Yeah, it was really well done because they did the whole bit where Orton bought Foley a front row ticket, just like you can watch True Greatness or whatever, and Foley didn't show. And so right before the match started, I think it was Jerry Lawler, he was getting in JR's face, like, will you admit that Mick Foley's a coward now? And JR's like, oh, I don't know what to tell you. He's a coward. I don't know what to tell you. And then Foley comes out, and it's like the biggest pop ever. And JR's like, I'll take it all back, Mick. And that whole moment was incredible. And one of the reasons that the 04 Rumble is one of my personal favorites is because it did such a great job, like you said, continuing those storylines and building towards WrestleMania 20. And that's something that a lot of the older Rumbles used to do really, really well. And in recent years has kind of gone out the wayside because I don't think they have a lot of their storylines planned out that far in advance, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, last year's is really good. I liked last year's, but for the most part, yes, recent ones have not been good.
Taker and Kane. This was the first signal of the return of the Dead Man.
Yeah, so Kane comes out, and then the lights go off, and and then Kane is like, I think he's so scared he eliminates himself, right? Is that it?
He was distracted, and somebody eliminated him.
Who eliminated him?
Let's see. I have the numbers pulled up right here. Kane was eliminated by Booker T.
Oh, Booker T. In the middle of his me and RVD are kind of main eventers on SmackDown, but also not really.
We're tag team partners too. They won the tag titles.
Yeah, for those weak sauce divisions that they had.
Hey, when you only have 4 tag teams, it makes sense to split across 2 shows to have 2 separate tag divisions. It makes perfect sense.
Makes a lot of sense. I agree. And then I think our final 4 for that one is Benoit and Big Show are obviously the last 2, but geez, I'm gonna say. Let me ask you a question. Is Eddie in the Royal Rumble?
Eddie, was he in this? I don't think he was.
Okay,
I'm looking at the list here. He was not.
I'm trying to think of who the other final four are. I would say it's not Orton.
Looks like okay.
I would say Cena.
It was Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, and Big Show.
Oh, okay. Never mind. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, but that was good. It had that great finish with Benoit pulling Big Show over the top with the crossface.
Yeah, and Benoit, say what you will about what he did in his personal life and how he destroyed his reputation and forever hurt the wrestling business afterwards. But as a worker, like he was one of those guys that could work with just about anybody. And you put him in there with Kane or Big Show, or if you put him in there with Angle or Jericho, like he could seemingly just have a great match with just about anybody. And this was no exception.
Yeah.
And by the way, Benoit was number 1 in this Rumble and went all the way and won it. Which was making him only the second person to do that. First being Shawn.
Yeah, but he did he was over an hour because I believe Shawn's was only 39 minutes or something.
Yeah, I mean, when Shawn did it, it was minute-long intervals, and when Benoit did it, was the traditional 2-minute intervals.
Yeah. Okay, what is our next Royal Rumble rewind?
All right, let's find out. Okay, we're going to the Attitude Era with this one, 1998. Oh
man, okay.
This is a fun one.
The show is very good, I think. Let me go through this card if I can remember correctly. You've got Vader Goldust.
Yep.
You've got
no, get it right. The artist formerly known.
Oh yes, with his weird strange version of Goldust theme. You've got Rock Shamrock. You've got Outlaws LOD. You've got a mini match, I think. You've got the Rumble, and then you've got the casket match. Am I right?
Correct. You are correct.
All right, cool. And it's in Fresno, right?
I believe so.
Oh man.
Yep. San Jose.
I know this stuff like the back of my hand. Yeah, so this was a great one. There's the mini match is what it is, but
Sonny looked great in the referee's outfit.
Yeah. It's a really great show. Vader and Goldust is fine for what it is. It's good. And once again, this was they're on the pay-per-view, so you've had a 2.5 month feud with these two, ever since Survivor Series. So this is once again in the era where WWF is telling long-term storylines between people that are clearly defined and set up properly. Rock and Shamrock.
Probably was this Vader's last pay-per-view win in the WWF before Kane murdered him with the wrench?
Yeah, maybe, because
his last pay-per-view win at least.
Yes, because he loses to Kane in February. He loses to Kane again in May. I can't remember if he's on the King of the Ring. He, I think, wrestles Mark Henry in July at Fully Loaded, which I think he loses. And I think that's his last pay-per-view is Fully Loaded. Because I think his last televised match he loses to Edge on Sunday Night Heat, if I remember correctly. So yeah, this is probably his last pay-per-view win. So wow. Rock and Shamrock was a good match which I thought was a clever ending.
I love their matches, by the way. They had such good chemistry. You want to talk about contrast of characters? You had The Rock, who was the sneaky cheating heel that would find a Weasley way to sneak out of there with the title, which he did here in a very clever way with the brass knucks and sneaking it into Shamrock shorts and everything. But and you put him up against this raging psychopath and Ken Shamrock who would lose his temper and just destroy people. It was a very natural fit to put those two together.
Yeah, it was such an Ali and Frazier. You had the consummate showman and the serious professional on the other side. They were so great together, and both guys benefited from it. And I mean, Shamrock always could have been the top guy. I think if he had stuck around longer, he would have been. But Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny because you remember him as this, and I think most people do, but like Rock is like a comedy character. I mean that in the best way. Like Rock's
Yeah.
fucking ridiculous. He like the way he like wrestles is like hilarious and like it's funny and stuff. Like the people's elbow is like ridiculous. But like I
The
always
way he
remember
sells
him.
the stunner.
Yeah, I always remember him this way, and that's why I think it's so funny now when people are like, "Rock is this like super badass." I'm like, I understand that he's like big and he has muscles and stuff, but like, it's not like the same as like Brock Lesnar, you know? And like, there was a point where like when Lesnar had the title for the first time, they're like the backstage story in WWE is they need to use Rock to beat him because he's the only one believable. I'm like, but Rock's like a joker, and he like flips around and he like shakes his leg before he hits you. Like it's kind of ridiculous. So I'm like he's the only one, like, you know, Undertaker's not more dangerous, or like, you know, or Cena or Reigns or anyone, you know. I don't know.
It speaks to how much things have changed, where like the comedy guy from the Attitude Era is now seen as like the unbeatable guy of the modern era, where it's like, oh no, Rock is more unbeatable than all these other young guys we have. And I'm like, wow, that's sad.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the tag title match is what it was. I mean, LOD at that point is getting like super. I've never seen a tag team age as quickly as LOD in the period of like the spring of 97 to the spring of 98. They go like, they just seem so out of touch by the time that happens. Like, no, like, and they're not even that old at that point. Like people are like the Outlaws are calling them OLD, but like it doesn't help that like they're up there and they're like, you're like, you smell like puke and poopy. Like like some of their insults are like the most childish things you've ever heard, and it's just like these guys feel so out of date here. And I just remember like watching them like fade away before my eyes. I'm like, these were like the coolest, most badass guys of the 80s. And now they just come across as so out of touch. It's insane.
That happened to like for the few '80s guys that kind of hung around and were around during this period. And I'll even use Dr. Death as an example, because people say that the Brawl for All ruined Dr. Death's career and everything. But it's like, do you really think that Dr. Death fit in with the Attitude Era? He looked wildly out of place to me. He just looked like a relic from a bygone era. And unfortunately, the Road Warriors kind of felt that way too, where it was like, if you didn't evolve and match in with the current era like Sting did when he adopted the Crow gimmick, you just looked ridiculously out of place. And unfortunately, the Road Warriors, one of the greatest tag teams of all time, you look at them in 98, 99, and they kind of, they look like they didn't belong there anymore.
Were they around in 99 in WWF?
Briefly. They were still there at like Royal Rumble 99 around that time, but they weren't around too much longer after that. Yeah.
Well, I would imagine they got signed in like 97. So I would imagine they're like, they probably signed a 2-year contract. Yeah, you know, like they are, it's funny you mentioned like guys that evolved. Like I'm watching, you know, I'm doing my Monday night rewatch, and like Savage is a guy that like totally gets it. And like you look at Wolfpack Savage and stuff, and I'm like, man, this is a guy who's like much older, but he's jacked to the gills. He like he seems current somehow, you know? And I'm like, I mean, his ring work is 100% suffering because of his knees and all the injuries he's taken. But as a character, he's like still insane and like works. And like, this is the point where like everybody's incorporating some aspect of hip hop into their personas, which is like becoming like, as a person watching in 2020, is becoming one of the most cringeworthy things I can see. But like at the time, like that shit was like people doing that was like, you know, like over
everybody
like Rover. Yeah. And like, but like Savage is like, oh man, he like compared to the Road Warriors, this guy like totally gets how to transition, and they just did not. But back to that match that I was talking about. It's a whatever match, and the Outlaws had to keep the title belts because they were clearly where the company was going, and the LOD were not.
Yeah, and they tried to reinvent them with LOD 2000, which again, outside of Sunny's amazing outfit, which is probably the hottest she's ever been, the LOD 2000 thing didn't work either.
It didn't work for multiple reasons. Number one, like they came back, and their first pay-per-view match, they couldn't beat the Outlaws for the titles again. So it's like, I mean, I don't think the Outlaws ever straight up beat them, but they were never able to beat the Outlaws, you know, like the Outlaws would always like lose by DQ or like cheat or something, but like, it's still like they couldn't get the job done. So they came off as failures on top of the fact that it was the same people in a different coat of paint.
Yeah. And they actually won the match here at the Rumble. They won by DQ, but it's still, like you said, it's like they just didn't seem like the guys that could just get the job done anymore.
Yeah. Then we had the Royal Rumble, which is a good one, not a great one, I would say, because there's
two things. It's known for Austin being awesome. It's like he was clear cut going to win this thing. There was never any doubt.
Yes.
And the Mick Foley 3 Faces of Foley thing, which was a really cool thing that they did, I thought.
Yeah. So there's one story in this Royal Rumble for the most part, and it's Steve Austin is the number one target. And, Austin like is smart and cool and beats everybody. And there's kind of this like, oh, the nation's going to like, they're, they do a few things well here. I want to like say it's like, they don't do anything here. There's a throwback to Dude Love and Steve Austin, like teaming up. Cause I think the final four is Austin, Dude Love, Rock, and Farouk.
I believe you're right.
And Rock is trying to basically do what MJF is doing now with the Inner Circle. He's trying to usurp the leader of the group. And there's that tension going on. I think Rock essentially allows Farouk to be eliminated, or he eliminates him. I can't remember. But that's a great one.
He did eliminate him, yes.
Yeah. So that's there, and that's pretty great. And then you get Austin and Rock as the final two, and they get a kind of a cool moment because they've been just feuding for the Intercontinental title. They're both like clearly the future of the company. So you get a cool moment there. There's also Triple H and Owens storyline progresses here. And you have Cactus and I know it's the same as Dude Love, but you have Cactus and Terry Funk like fighting with like all the hardcore weapons. So those are the main things I remember actually happening in this. I don't think much else happened.
No, that's all of the main stuff that pretty much happened. Again, this was one of those Rumbles where it's like Austin's clearly the star. Actually, one of the things that sticks out to me about this Rumble is when Austin finally entered, and I have it here. He entered in at 24.
Yeah, he comes from
everybody
behind
in the ring just stopped. Because I think it was all heels in the ring at that point. They all just stopped and looked at the entranceway. Well, Austin entered the crowd.
If you remember the build up to this, Austin attacked everybody in the Royal Rumble beforehand. He was like injuring everybody, and he says, "Listen, I'm going to be the number one target anyway, so I'm going to go out with a blaze of glory and beat everybody up anyway. So like people are going to fight me anyway, so I might as well just kick their ass while I can."
And the big thing to take away from this is that Mike Tyson was there watching all of this and actually cheered Austin's victory, which would lead into what I feel is one of the best build-ups in WrestleMania history. So
he really loved Cold Stone Creamery.
He did.
For those of you who haven't seen the 1998 Royal Rumble, Mike Tyson, who is a huge wrestling fan, but for some reason did not know how to say Stone Cold's name, said Cold Stone, Cold Stone.
Cold Stone.
Good stuff. And then we had our main event. We had the third meeting in 5 months between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. I would rank this as it's obviously not as good as Hell in a Cell. And I guess I'd put it slightly over Ground Zero. I really like Ground Zero a lot. But
I would probably say this is my least favorite pay-per-view match that they ever had, which is saying a lot because
interesting.
Yeah, because that's how good their pay-per-view matches were, where this one is probably my least favorite one that they did, where the whole thing was good and everything, but it felt like it was just a speed bump to get to Undertaker and Kane at WrestleMania. It's like, all right, Shawn keeps the title, and we need to do that last final push for Taker and Kane.
It was when you were watching this at the time, even when I was like a kid, you knew that Shawn Michaels was not losing the title because the Undertaker was not going to wrestle Kane for the belt. That like never happened. He was always in the freak show match. So, but the match was good. Of course it ended Shawn's career for 4 years, but, it had some cool spots in it. It had the it had the crotch chop above the casket. Then Taker grabs his crotch and throws him back in. It has the choke slam. I think it has a top rope choke slam, and it has the tombstone into the casket. And then it has. Cool. Yeah, that was super cool. It has the elbow drop in the casket. It's pretty cool. I wish Michael got his arm up a little more. It looks kind of like he's just falling on them. But there is a great callback to the 1994 Royal Rumble, where Yokozuna is wrestling the Undertaker, and like I think like 10 guys come down and just like beat up Undertaker and smash up the urn and stuff. And that's how Yokozuna is able to beat him in the casket match. Yep. And Undertaker basically says to Shawn, he's like, the only time I've lost in a casket match was when 10 guys came in and beat me up. And I don't see 10 guys in DX, which is cool because it acknowledges that like, oh, okay, Undertaker's not undefeated in these things, but he's like pretty damn good and you need an army to stop him. But of course, you know, Shawn hires the Outlaws and Los Boricuas, who they've both used in the past. Like they teamed up with the Outlaws to take on LOD, and they've paid off the Boricuas in the past to attack Owen Hart leading up to this. So this was more great Attitude Era storylines of like, hey, all this stuff that happens like makes sense and leads up to something. So like they came down, and then of course Kane comes down, knocks them out. You think that there's going to be a reconciliation. Then Kane beats up Undertaker, gives the match to Shawn, and oh yes, lights the casket on fire.
To add insult to injury, we got to have attempted murder at the end of the pay-per-view. But as you remember, they open up the casket and take.
He wasn't there.
No.
But don't feel too bad for him, Patrick, because we will find out in 10 months that the Undertaker did start the fire that killed their parents anyway.
Yeah, so yeah, for all you Undertaker fans out there, he is a murderer, just so you know.
He is. I always wonder why they're like, oh, I feel bad for Undertaker. I was like, why? Paul Bearer was right the whole time.
And joined his side after a while.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. When he does that, it's like, it is kind of the culmination of like a year and a half of storytelling, because remember, Paul Bearer is like, I want to go back. Being with Mankind was a stupid decision, and you're the champion now, and obviously you have the staying power, and I just want to come back. And Undertaker's like, no, you suck, screw you. And then he's like, okay, I'm gonna go back with Mankind, and also I'm gonna tell your secret. And he's like, oh God, don't do that. And then he's like, well, you got to fight this guy. He's like, I'm not gonna do it. Then he finally does it and joins forces with Kane, and then he's just like, oh, fuck this, I don't like Kane anymore. And then Paul Bearer's like, all right, you finally came back to me after this whole rigmarole.
Well, they had to form the Ministry of Darkness and do human sacrifices on live TV.
Oh man, if only the Ministry of Darkness had a better ending to it, and not it was me, Austin,
the corporate ministry.
Like, would you say? So you and I talk about this a lot, and we're wrapping up here, I promise everybody. But you and I talk about this a lot. But we agree that 97 is probably the peak creative year for WWE. Would you say that?
98 had its moments too, but I kind of lean more towards 97.
Yeah, I mean, especially like April to December or April to November, 97 is amazing. I've heard people say 89 should be up there too.
I'll say this about 89. My two favorite storylines in company history are Austin McMahon and the rise and fall of the Mega Power. So I guess that would start in like late 87 when Hogan and Savage, or it was late 88 or something. I forget which it was. But when they joined forces and then everything building up to WrestleMania 5, I think that is also one of the greatest storylines they've ever done. So,
yeah,
you know, and that carries into 89. So, yeah, 89, they had a lot of great stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So if we agree that 97 is probably the creative peak, would we say the peak of the Attitude Era goes from like post WrestleMania 13 to Survivor Series 98?
Yeah, that's about right.
I would say, because it starts getting not as good after that.
Yeah, 2000 had its really good, but like 99, it felt like they were just riding the high of of what had been done before. But I think 2000 they bounced back a little bit, and then at the end of 2000 is when things really started to go south, I think.
Well, 2000 had better matches because it wasn't all the let's brawl in the crowd forever. They had better pay-per-views overall, and they had better matches. But as far as like the storytelling aspect of it, I always felt I think in like late 98, they started abandoning the undercard. Like you would never in WWE and in WCW for that matter, for a while, ever see a match that hadn't been promoted. I mean, occasionally they would have like, it's a bonus match or something. But for the most part, like you wouldn't have that. And I remember Breakdown 98 being the first time they did that, where it was like Owen Hart and Edge for no reason and things like that.
Yeah.
So like I don't know, part of me is like, Deadly Game's like the peak of everything. It's like what it's kind of built up to since like the end of WrestleMania 13. Or I guess more accurately SummerSlam 97.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. Deadly Games, that was you want to talk about great one night storytelling. That whole thing was great.
Yeah.
When we do our Survivor Series rewinds, we got to do that one.
I feel like we probably have done that once or twice, but yeah, we can do it again.
Sure.
Okay, I think that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment below. But for myself and my partner, Mr. Patrick Kelly, we are
signing off.